Friday, we're talking about sweat. I'm so excited about this because I think it does really matter. But the reason I'm excited about it is because it's really complicated and it doesn't need to be. I think especially if we're talking about and we will talk about the Levelen sweat test results. Like when you get that back, it's like a 3-page sheet of numbers that is really hard to decipher, but there are ways to do it. Cool. Sweat. Let's talk about sweat. Okay, so there are a couple different ways to go about this. There are like medical grade sweat tests. There are wearable sweat tests that you can do at home. There's also like fluid loss tests that you can do at any point throughout the year to sort of like keep your numbers on a spreadsheet so you know at what temperature you're losing more than less. So basically, I think like the idea of hydration in terms of a fueling plan for training and racing is super important because hydration is super important because it affects everything from like performance to like your body's organs and tissues, flushes out like all the waste. It helps with temperature regulation, and it helps like distribute your nutrition throughout your body as you're doing hard things. So I don't know, like feel free to jump in and add at any time. I just have a lot of like information in my brain about this because I've been reading about it so much. And I've done a fluid loss and a sweat concentration loss recently as well. So basically like the ins and outs of this is that like the general recommendation for like your daily requirement of hydration is like half your body weight in ounces plus adding 16 to 20 ounces for every hour of exercise that you do. But fluid loss testing can help sort of dial this in better and give us like a baseline with knowing how and when and what to add. So let's see. I think with this, let's just start with like the fluid loss conversation. There's a couple easy ways to do this, and the most common way is to first thing in the morning or before a run, if you're not a morning runner, get naked, get a scale, stand on the scale, write down that number. If you have any issues with like weight or anything's like triggering, you have like a history, that's totally fine. You can find like a partner or a friend to just record the difference in weight when you do this. But you need to like record that first naked weight pre-run. Then the best thing to do is to go run. Easy hour, like I would say 45 to 75 minutes, but like if you're not great at math, like me, like if I was Andrew, I'd be like, I'm gonna go for 75 minutes and I'm probably gonna drink 30 ounces of water. And like I would do all that math if I could. I cannot. Andrew can. So I'm just gonna say to keep it simple, run for an hour, don't drink anything, don't eat anything. Get home, take your clothes off. Again, you're weighing yourself naked after the run. And then you're going to keep track of the difference in your weight. So if you lost 2 pounds in an hour, what's that, like 32 ounces? You're going to translate that to ounces. And then you can like record these losses on a chart or like a Google spreadsheet to keep track. One really good thing to do is to keep track of the temperature when you tested and the time of year. That way, when you're like going through a training block, it'll fluctuate a little bit, depending on the temperature, but the thing that doesn't change is your sweat concentration. So if you know you're like a high concentration, like salty sweater, that number is not going to change. The amount of weight you lose pre and post run will change depending on the time of year, depending on the weather, depending on your training cycle. But we're going to combine these two things to like help figure this out. Cause I think like Logan, with you specifically at Run Rabbit Run, I think one of my favorite videos I have on my phone right now is you coming through the aid station psyched, but you say, I puked so much. And it was like right before I picked you up to pace. And my thought was, oh God, what have we done? So, when situations like that happen, or if like you get some athletes experience nausea, vomiting, others experience like low blood pressure or diarrhea, or any time your like body is actively losing fluids, like knowing what your sweat loss rate is and your sweat concentration rate is can help us get back on track. Does anyone have any questions? I feel like I just like came in hot. Like I've had 3 cups of coffee, so that's where we're at today.
I think my question would be like, I got my sweat test results back. I'm a super salty sweater. So I'm supposed to replace 1,200 milligrams of sodium an hour. How
That's
do
what.
I do that? Like my current fueling strategy was only like 450 milligrams of sodium per hour. So I'm just like, how do I even get to that number?
Yeah, that's a lot. That was your sweat concentration, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Because you don't have to actually replace 100% of the losses, right? Or that's not typically the advice, right? It's like
Right.
what, 75 or 80%?
Yep.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
number was like 1,400. So she was like, replace 10,000 to 1,200.
Oh, okay. We're in the same boat then.
Yeah.
Um, I guess sharing what I did before I figured out how salty of a sweater I was like a big scratch fan, and that was how I handled a lot of my fueling.
Mhm.
And my experience is that it's really difficult to have like liquid hydration that has carbs and the appropriate salt level. Like when you're an outlier, right? Like those I
Yeah.
think probably work really well if you're actually close to the average. So I now only put element in my water, which is nice because I think there's 1,000 mgs
Yeah.
in each serving. And then because comes in those like little packets, I've done even on like all day adventure runs, I'll stick like 12 of those in my pack. And then I only do like gels and other stuff for calories, which is maybe not ideal, if you're used to like liquid fueling only, but it does make it easy for me to like make sure I'm getting enough salt because I've avoided like all the problems I used to have when I would go really long times or distances.
Yeah, this is exactly where I'm at. I just started looking into Element, and then I was like, but now I've got to figure out how to offset because I'm losing carbs in my fluids with just switching to Element so I can gain that sodium. So now I've got to pick up my carbs and gels. So yeah, that's exactly where I'm at right now. I'm in that exploratory phase. So it's good to hear Element's working. And yeah, those packets are small, so stuff a bunch in there.
Yeah, when I did an adventure run in the Olympics last summer, and it was like hot even for the Pacific Northwest, and I literally went through 12 of them because we were sweating so much, which like don't tell a doctor, they probably have a heart attack for on my behalf. But um even with that, I got done and I could tell that I like had still was like a little behind where I should have been.
Mm.
One thing I will say is that Element actually has a flavor called ocean water. So I saw your comment in Slack yesterday and I was like, problem solved. Get
There
some
we go.
packets. But it's like their natural flavor because it is so salty. One of their flavors that I really like, that I can't do back to back to back, like I'll alternate from like the ocean water to grapefruit is like my flavor of choice. Um, that's really helpful. But excuse me, on the feed, you can actually get like sample packs. So you can get like
Mm.
a pack of 12 in one box. Um, if you want to like start testing.
I literally got one of those yesterday from the feed. Just the
Right.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're awesome. And sometimes they have them on deals. Like as you're checking out, it's
That's
like
what it
impulse
was. Yep.
aisle.
Yep. It was like
Mm.
$5 for a pack of 8, like the sample pack. I get the unflavored one like typically, but I was like, that's a good deal. I'll just do it anyways. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good deal. I would check that out. Or I think even in Salida, you guys have a really good run shop that has like a ton of nutrition there too. I would check there. The other thing too is that Precision actually has like tabs, the like effervescent tabs that you can put in a water bottle or in a soft flask, and they've got 500, 1000, and 1500. I've been using the 1500 and have had to like find carbs in other ways. So I've been looking for like really high carb gels. I've been using e-gels, which are thick, and I can only take them like, they're like thicker than goo.
Yeah.
So brace yourself if you go that route. But I'm kind of in the same situation as you, Logan, where I'm like upping the sodium and searching for higher calorie or sorry, higher carb gels.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is good insight. I'm excited to get like a hot run in the summer that's over 20 miles and see if I don't puke because I'm at 100% puke rate right now.
Yeah. Or like 7 times in the Grand Canyon, 12
That
times.
was
It was a
yeah,
lot.
that was bad.
Yeah. The other thing too, and I'll link this in this week's newsletter, but Kylie Van Horn has a sweat masterclass where she breaks down the different types of sweat tests that you can do, like Levelen, Precision, H drop, Gatorade. Like she's kind of done them all, and she breaks down how to interpret them. But so Andrew's, you've done Levelen, I've done Levelen, Logan's done Precision. I'm doing a Precision next week, which is like too late for Black Canyon, which is a whole other conversation. But the Precision option currently is the only medical grade option available. And there are only certain people who are like certified to give it. So it's very similar to like how people couldn't do blood flow restriction therapy like 10 years ago. Like there were like one person in every state or whatever. That's kind of how Precision is now. But you can go to their website and you can type in your location and it'll like pop up through. Oh, cool. Andrew did one through a local bike shop. Sweet. Yeah, but you can kind of like figure out where they are based on where you live. Which is great. I think the confusing thing with sweat testing and sweat concentration and being able to apply it to your fueling plan is to come up with like you use your fluid loss data to come up with your intake target. So it's going to be a range, right? So basically if you lose 34 ounces per hour, my target intake would be between 26 and 31 ounces per hour to like reuptake. And then you would take the sodium sweat concentration. You take the sodium sweat concentration and multiple like fluid target per hour, whatever. So I would say like 26 milligrams per ounce times 27 like ounces per hour, and that would get me around 700 milligrams of sodium per hour that I would need to be retaking, and that would be like the low end of that range. So the high end was 31, right? If I did like the 26 to 31 ounces per hour of intake that I would need. So then I would just multiply 27 milligrams per ounce by 31 ounces per hour. And that would get me to the high range, which would be about like 837, 840. So if I was doing like 100-miler, say, like I would try to stay within that like 700 to 840 per hour range. You don't want to overdo it because too much salt can also make you nauseous. So there's like a really fine line you have to stay along. Ren, I'm reading your comment right now. We are all very, very salty sweaters. Himalayan salt capsules are cheap, fast, and don't have a taste, so no flavor fatigue. That's a good option.
Yeah, and that still gives me, like, because I know exactly how much sodium I'm getting in every single capsule, that still gives me the option to have like double or triple scratch in one of my flasks. So I can still use some of that for fueling along the way and don't have to go gels the entire way. But it saves a lot of room in my vest. The one thing that I did learn is that the depending on what kind you get, the exterior of the capsule can soften and melt, and your salt then falls out into your Ziploc bag. I've never had a problem with this. Like on a run, that's never happened, but don't leave them in your car and then expect to be able to use them for your run in a week.
Where did you
Whoops.
find them? Are they in stores or did you just order them online?
I ordered them online from some nutrition shop, and I'll go downstairs and get the brand and the details.
Yeah, because my thing with LMNT is that I mean I've tried the non-flavored one, but the flavored ones sometimes have stevia in them, and I can't do stevia. So that's like with any drink mix. That's why I can usually only do scratch.
The my only cautionary tale with the capsules, because I used to do those, and then I got like really behind on my um fluid and salt in a couple of situations. And I'm not a person who ever has trouble with pills. Like I have never been like, I can't take a pill. But I distinctly remember being in the back half of the Teton Crest Trail and almost throwing up and literally being physically unable to get one of those capsules down because I was like already fairly behind. So um that's maybe just like something to keep in mind, as I feel like you have to be more on top of things.
Yeah. And I think for similar reasons, I don't personally like to use them as a preload because it's just too much hitting the stomach at one time. Learned that one really the hard way. But if I take like one every 15 minutes when it's 100 degrees and 90% humidity, like that helps me to stay up on it. It's not too much. And Caitlin, it's just like it
Okay.
Nutricost is the
Yeah.
brand. The tricky thing with these is that they say, I don't know if you can see this on here, it's 1,000 milligrams per serving, but you actually have to look at the label because it's 1,000 milligrams of the Himalayan salt, but it's 400 milligrams of sodium per capsule. So you
Interesting.
it
That's funny.
if you just looked at the label, you would think, oh, I only have to take one of these. No, you have to take four.
Yeah.
But the dosing is easier that way.
Yeah. I will note
Um,
too, and then back to Andrew's comment is like I mean I've struggled too with, or actually maybe you said about like the doing it all at one time too. That's the only thing. So I've actually dumped them into my bottle or something. Um, so, but it's handy. It's at least handy to like be able to put in your pack.
Yeah. I think it's also important to remember too that like when we sweat, like the two things we're losing the most of are sodium and chloride. So we also lose like potassium, magnesium, and calcium, but it's like the sodium content is like the thing to be looking at. So like on a gel or on LMNT or on like the nutrition label, I would just be checking the sodium because that's the highest amount lost of all of the minerals that we lose. I haven't tried Replenish Electrolyte Powder by Raw, but that might be worth checking out too. I think has anyone found like because I used to use the high carb scratch mix, but kind of had the same experience that Andrew that you had. Has anyone found a drink mix besides LMNT that you've like really liked that has a lot of sodium?
so I like the stuff by Raw. Like as because you just scoop it out. You're not taking packets and trying to like customize your dose that way. But the other one that I really like that comes, and this one does come in a little packet, is Mortal Hydration has a high sodium. It's either 900 or 1,000 milligrams per packet. I think their salty mango is delicious, but the jug stuff is also a little bit more cost effective.
I had to find my mute button. That's awesome. That's a really good option, Ren. I think too, UCAN is a brand. They have gels and powders and stuff, but they have a hydration mix that's just like mostly electrolytes, which like another part of this too, especially if you're running in the heat. But I think it's really important to have and I kind of want to like build out a spreadsheet that include like helps athletes sort of like be able to set this up, or like if I sent one out, you could just make a copy of it and like keep a list of all of your numbers. That way, like if you're doing a race in the desert, you kind of can keep track of the temperature. But even if you're doing like 100-mile, your numbers are going to change whether you're running like in the heat of the day or in the middle of the night when it's a little bit colder. Like your intake is going to need to be a little bit different for those sections of the race as well. So, yeah. Hey, Chris. All right. Does anyone have any other questions? Oh, wait, there's one in the chat. How much do we think about sodium throughout our daily nutrition while not running? I think that's a good question. So basically, I think like sodium helps regulate the like hydration status of the body because it like manages the movement of water in and out of the cells. But I think this is one of those questions where it's like, oh, it depends. Like, are you sitting at a desk all day? Are you stationary all day? Are you walking around? Do you have like outside, you know what I mean? Like an outside job? Are you sweating throughout the day? That's a tough question. But I think that like,
Yeah, I guess it's more so the question of like, because like if you do, like I'm a morning runner, so then afterwards, like how much is this, do I kind of make back throughout the day? And then the same question, I mean, like, I don't know, I put a lot of salt on all my stuff. And I'm always, sometimes I worry about that because the opposite, where, like you said, that can also cause problems being, um, obviously, I mean, a lot of the general public is told to reduce their sodium intake. So, again, it's just one of those caveats too, where it's like, yeah, I know you're supposed to reduce it, but at the same time, like thinking about endurance athletes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I
The
think go ahead, Andrew.
As one of those heavy salters, I will say I feel like I've gotten a much, now that I pay attention, like over the past couple of years, I feel like I have a much better sense day to day when I'm like behind, or like especially in the summer. It feels like even if I'm drinking Element on my runs, um, I will like crave salt, or I can tell when I feel like crap because I haven't been getting enough of it. So I definitely think like, not that there's a firm rule, but I feel like if you pay attention, you can like build up that sense for how much the rest of your like day-to-day diet is helping contribute. Because like I know the days where I sit down at the dinner table and the salt shaker is just like going and going and going on my food. Um, and so, and I guess now that I like, yeah, can tell the difference, like, oh, I'm really craving this. I don't feel bad about it at all, even though like I have like the genetic risks where I probably should be reducing sodium, but like I just can tell when I feel like I need it. So, I don't worry about it as much. I don't tell my mother how much salt I eat on a regular basis. Um, but yeah, like for me, the other thing that I've noticed with kind of like salt and hydration overall, like if I do my hard workout in the morning and then I try and sit down at work, if I'm behind, I cannot focus at all and I'm like ready to go take a nap. And so if I ask myself like, oh, why am I so tired, even if I'm not necessarily specifically thirsty, that's a good signal for me. So I feel like just keeping an eye on some of those things can be helpful outside of just the like, oh, I really want some tortilla chips.
I always want tortilla chips. It's just like a problem. I do think it's important too to act, like to also make sure that you're drinking like regular water, like not just ocean water all the time. That could get tricky, but yeah, I think listening to your body and like tapping in or honing in on like what you're craving is a good way to sort of navigate that. So Logan, when you did the precision test, and they gave you those numbers back, what have you changed so far in training?
Nothing yet.
Just kind of
It's
starting
been
out.
cool. And I've been like dealing with that hamstring injury, so I haven't really done any super intense workouts, but as I'm starting to ramp up and like even today, like the high is going to get to the 50s. So if I ran today, I would probably sweat. So we got to start looking into that stuff. I've got some salt capsules um, that I can take that are like 500 milligrams a hit. So I might do that. But yeah, I haven't really had anything to where I've had to like focus in on it.
Okay,
Yeah.
get started.
I know. I'm so excited about this. When I
Yeah.
got those numbers back, I was like, oh, this answers so many questions.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think too, like it like now, like this time of year is a really good time to start doing like fluid loss testing. Just so you have an idea of like how much you're losing per hour before like those really long runs start or before it starts getting really hot and you're doing really long runs at the same time. But the concentration is a good thing to keep in mind too, because like especially like if you're the type of person who like you take off a hat after a run or your vest and it's just like caked in salt
yeah.
lines. Yep. That's when we know we need to be taking more in.
How does humidity play a factor into that?
That's a good question. I would say humidity actually show like I think humidity shows us a more accurate version of our sweat loss versus like a dry heat. It's like when I go run in Tucson, when I did the first time I did a Levelen test here, I didn't sweat at all. And I mean I did, but it just like evaporates immediately. So it's harder to tell how much you're sweating in like a desert dry heat environment versus running somewhere really humid where it's literally just like turning into calcium on your skin, or
Yeah.
turning into like salt crystals on your skin. So I think that's what I would say. I've
Wait,
never,
so- okay, if I'm taking, sorry to interrupt.
oh, good.
If I take a salt test at home, I'm going to get one result, right? If I go to Florida and take a salt test, am I going to get a completely different result?
Probably.
So what do I do?
Okay.
Because
So
like, I don't know.
that's a good question. So the reason why this is so important is because like a lot of people don't just like do races in their backyards, right? Like
Yeah.
you travel, you know. So having the temperature and even like if you put in a column in the Google sheet with like humidity, you can kind of get an idea for what it will be like on race day. But Chris, to your point, there is a difference between fluid loss and sweat concentration. So your fluid loss will fluctuate based on the humidity, based on the temperature, based on the altitude, sometimes even like weather conditions will affect fluid loss. What doesn't change that much, like what you probably only need to do one time, is a sweat concentration test. And that just tells you how heavy or how salty of a sweater you are. So like Logan and myself and Andrew and Ren, it sounds like we're all really salty sweaters. So aiming for something like 1,000 or 1,500 milligrams of sodium per hour is like that's the number that we'll aim for. The fluid loss rate will change based off of the weather conditions.
So are these two different tests we're talking about?
You can get both numbers from one test.
And what's the recommended besides Logan's witch doctor? Do you have a recommended at home?
I think the best wearable, like the best like at home wearable would probably be Levelen. But Precision is the one that I would recommend. It's the only medical grade
All
test
right.
available. So I would suggest you do that one. I mean, if you can't find someone in your area who does like the precision test, or if you want to like go hang out. Well, I guess Logan, you did that in Arvada, right?
Yeah, I did it in Boulder. There's one in Littleton. In
Okay.
I'll
St.
do it. I'll
Petersburg.
just, yeah.
Yeah.
I just
So
wanted to
Let's do
give
the sweat
Logan
wedge.
I just wanted to give
He's
Logan a
right.
hard time.
oh, that's amazing. Yeah, but basically, so like Chris, like the fluid loss test is like you have a scale, but the key thing about this is like having the scale in the same place. So if you have the scale in your bathroom, awesome. Like get naked, weigh yourself, write that number down, go run for an hour, don't drink anything, don't eat anything, come back, get naked again, weigh yourself again, record that number, and the difference in those numbers is the amount of fluid you lost on that run in that 1 hour.
Yeah.
So you can keep track of that on a Google Sheet or however you want to do it, but you can also keep track of like, you can do this like every quarter of the year, right? Like sweat concentration, you only need to do once. You can test your fluid loss throughout the year. So if you move lower than 8,000 feet, it might change. If you're visiting
so-
Florida, it might change. The loss number will change. But you can keep track of the temperatures as well.
Yeah, that's really good to think about. I don't want to, I hope this isn't a pivot, but it's more of a question, I think. So when we were just in, we were on vacation and I ran in Tahiti and my heart rate was like zone 5 and I wasn't running that fast. And I run that same pace here and I'm zone 2. And it's just like, I guess the question is, if I follow through with doing this race in Wisconsin and it's super humid, how can I prepare with where I live now for a race where I want to be slapped in the face with humidity?
We could do heat training with the altitude training, but we could also, I think the best answer to this is to really dial in your fueling plan with respect to like your sweat loss, because you're going to be sweating a lot more. Yeah. So
get the sweat test done. Sounds like, yeah.
Yeah. I would want to know what your sweat concentration rate is. And then from there, like if you're a super salty sweater like Logan and you're like, oh, wow, this makes so much sense why I'm so nauseous all the time, or whatever else is happening, like you can find sports nutrition products that you can start testing in training to use on race day.
Cool.
Logan.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. I know like some of this stuff gets really complicated because when you do get like the Levelen test results back, it's literally 3 pages of numbers. But the only numbers you really need to pay attention to on that is like your total sodium, what is like your total sodium and sweat concentration. So
And
that way you can know
I know
what
I came in this a little late. You're saying the precision sweat test is the same thing as a Levelen sweat test. It's just more accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
I would recommend the precision over the Levelen. But if you can only do it at home, then Levelen is a good option.
Cool.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm like, how can I make this even more complicated?
I think that's great.
Yeah. So, yeah. Any other questions? I don't know. Part of me wants to Chris, before you jumped on, we also talked about LMNT and how that has like a really high sodium level in their like single-use packets, which is a good idea. And how before Andrew did his sweat test, he was using a lot, and I was using the same, the high carb scratch, super high carb scratch, which is great, but it didn't have enough sodium to like replenish the loss that was happening. So even though you're getting plenty of carbs, you're not getting enough sodium to like actually replenish what you're losing. So you still kind of feel like garbage at the end, which could cause bonking, which could cause like recovery issues like XYZ. So what we talked about a little bit was how by increasing the sodium content that we're taking in, now we're looking for higher carb gels because a lot of times
I
they
see.
don't, they're not like combined, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Spring said that it was possible, but we all found out.
Huh?
So, yeah.
Oh, man.
So yeah, I think that's the tricky part, but that's also why like doing these tests every quarter or just like consistently throughout the year, like the sweat loss, not the concentration, is so important because you can figure out in what temperatures you start sweating more, how much you should be drinking, you know what I mean? And like people do this all the time. Like I was on the Black Canyon Trail a few weeks ago with Tara Dower, and she literally brought a scale in the car to weigh herself before and after in like the public bathroom at the trailhead, you know, like as long as it's consistent, like you have the same scale and the same, because if you put a scale on like a gravel road, it's probably not going to be super accurate. But if you put it on like a cement floor, it's better, you know, not ideal, but better. But just doing it consistently, I think is the key.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's fun to nerd out on these fine details, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. And I think it's also interesting too, because when we talk about like fueling plans and race strategies, having a fueling plan that includes salt intake, that includes your hydration and your electrolyte intake is really important. Because when your stomach flips and you can't take in gels anymore, having a backup option that, you know, if there is some like miracle powder that has like the carbs and the electrolytes and the sodium, like all of the things, that would be awesome. But being able to like practice those worst case scenarios in training or on long runs or race simulations will help make it easier to pivot when something goes sideways in a race.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I do think it's really interesting too how like the miracle powder probably would be $15 a dose. Would be it's basically athletic greens. That's it. That's the answer. Um, but yeah, and it's really interesting because all of this stuff is like so nuanced and so individualized, similar to like how like sodium bicarb only works for certain people, and that's $15 a dose, right? But it's not even guaranteed to like work for everyone. So you really have to like start practicing and figuring out what works for you at what temperatures. So and I mentioned this before too, but it's like if I were to run Javelina 100-miler, my fluid loss and my sweat rate would be different at 12 p.m. than it would be at 12 a.m. You know, like being able to adjust and know ahead of time, like, oh, I'm going to need less sodium for the night section because I'm going to be sweating less, is actually a really good thing. And because again, there's that fine line where if I'm running at night and I'm taking in 1,500 milligrams of sodium, probably going to feel pretty awful. But if I'm taking in 1,500 milligrams of sodium in the middle of the day, in the middle of the desert, I'd probably be fine.
Are we talking about two different things?
Mm-hmm.
So like a precision sweat test is going to tell me sodium, right? But it's not going to tell me fluid loss.
Yes. So the precision test gives you your sodium concentrate. That's
Yeah.
how much you lose per hour. That's how much sodium you lose. Your
Yeah.
fluid loss is how much fluid, like weight in fluid,
Yeah.
you lose per hour. So you can do a fluid loss test at home.
So now we're planning carbs, sodium, and volume of fluids.
Yep.
This isn't complicated at all.
It gets so
Straightforward.
complicated.
It's just
Running is easy. All you need is a pair of shoes.
Right. Caitlin, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I mean, going off of all this, and to your point too, is it's all so individualized as well. It's not going to be the same um, prescription for each person. I'm wondering, I mean, I have a feeling you're going to say Kylie Van Horn or something like that, but I'm just curious of like, do you recommend working with someone specifically to just figure this out? Or who have you worked with, or is it just testing? And like, I mean, I've worked with Kylie with other things and I love her. She's great. Put a lot of money towards her, which is, she's great. But wondering if there's another any other options too.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think you need to be working with like a certified nutritionist to dial this in. A lot of times like a Levelen test is $250. Like that's going to give you all the information you need. You don't need to spend, I would not recommend spending more than that. If you do the precision test, it's about $250 as well. But you don't need to pay someone to interpret your results. Yeah.
The counterpoint to that, though, I think it kind of depends on the results and your personal context.
That's a good point.
Is I'm not a particularly salty sweater, but I am an extremely profuse sweater. My sweat test said that I'm in the 99th percentile of fluid loss, which was like, I sent this to my mother because I thought it was funny. And she said, you needed to pay money for somebody to tell you that. It runs in the family. But the way that my results came back, it was when I tried to do the math on my own, I could not figure out how to meet the sodium targets that I was looking at, because at that level of fluid loss, it kind of doesn't matter whether I'm a super salty sweater or not. Like I just can't keep up. So I did end up getting a lot of benefit out of working with a sports dietitian to figure out a preload and reload type of strategy that helped me like stop continuously dying in the summer. But I was able to find somebody who was actually fully covered by insurance, Caitlin. Just looking, I've Blue Cross Blue Shield. Obviously, everybody's mileage is going to vary. But I just ended up looking on their website for sports dietitians, and then doing a heck of a lot of Googling. But there were enough practices around here that accepted BCBS that it ended up being fully covered. It was super, super useful.
That's a really good call out. I think it is interesting because if I got like getting my sweat concentration number back, I was like, oh, cool. I can just apply this to my like hydration plan or whatever. But for someone who is also a heavy sweater as well as a very salty sweater, like that could get more complicated. So working with professionals is like obviously a good idea in that situation. Other nutritionists that I know of, so Kylie, obviously, I'll drop a few more in the chat, but there's a gal named Andrea that is part of the coaches collective with me. She's wonderful. And oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the other girl's name. And there's a guy named Victor who works with my friend Tara. So I'm gonna like compile all this information. I don't know what their like prices are per month, or if you have to sign up for 3 months or 6 months or whatever, or if you can just do like a one-off consultation with them. But if there are situations like Ren's where it's like this could get really complicated, or like you're in the 99th percentile, then I would suggest working with someone who knows what they're doing. So yeah. How, like Ren, how have you like felt a significant difference since you started like incorporating that feedback into your training?
I mean, yeah, I stopped blacking out on the side of the road.
Oh my God.
I mean, it didn't make summer training all that much more fun, but I was a heck of a lot less worried about my welfare.
Yeah, that's fair. Not blacking out on the side of the road is always a good thing. Yeah. Cool, cool. I know this stuff is really complicated though. So like, I guess I'm wondering, would you guys find it helpful if I brought on a nutritionist to like sort of break this all down and walk us all through it? Or would you want to like, I mean, we wouldn't do it like next week or anything, but if we set a time where it's kind of like, okay, if you have your test results, awesome. If you don't, you have time to get one so that you at least have the numbers, and then we can have this person come in and talk to the team and field questions. Like, would that be helpful? Yeah. Okay, cool. I'll start reaching out to a couple people and see if we can get someone on.
Yeah, I like the idea of like fielding the questions too. That way Like if you get the test done, then you can, yeah, that'd be nice.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll start reaching out and trying to find someone. Kylie will actually be here next week, so maybe I can talk her into it. But yeah. So I'll also include these people's names and like contact info on the newsletter. I'll like pull all that together, but and link out the precision test and the Levelen test for people who are interested. But yeah, it's wild because it's like kind of frustrating because I feel like people are like, oh, running's so great. All you need is a pair of shoes. But then, hi, Katie. Um, but then you also need like a $500 watch and a heart rate monitor and like a treadmill that sometimes doesn't work and like Chris is and like sweat tests and there's all of these things that have a tendency to really overcomplicate something that like we originally fell in love with because it was so simple, and it gets a little like jarring. So deep breaths. But there's information. There are people who know much more than me that will bring in and ask questions too, because the stuff is important. And I think like this part of the year is a really good time to start dialing these things in and like at least just start thinking about it or getting your numbers put together so that like come April, May, June, when the temperatures start creeping up and people are doing 100Ks, people are, diving back into the race scene, you have more confidence going in knowing that you did what you could. So, yeah. I feel like this is gonna be one of those Zooms that I go back and listen to, and I'm like, I said the same thing like 3 different times in 3 different ways, and no wonder everyone's confused. I apologize. But yeah. Or we can all just stop racing in the summer. That's an option too, especially if you live where Ren does, because it is hot and humid.
Yeah, Chris, you can come down to Baltimore for a training camp if you want. It's like 90% humidity all the time. It's great.
That would be amazing. I would take humidity over dry heat any day.
It's
120 degrees in dry heat, you can't even tell when you're sweating. It's super dangerous.
it's really fascinating that like we live at such a high elevation and my heart rate's pretty low, and I went to sea level and my heart rate was higher than it's ever been.
I think there could have been a couple things contributing to that. One is travel. You were on a plane for 13 hours and you weren't at home, right? 2 is the temperature. 3, I mean, there's all sorts of things like elevation could play a role in that, where like after being on the plane for so long, like bodies and jet lag like they're not usually friends. So there's a couple different reasons why that could have been. It is really interesting though that it was that much higher.
Well, because it was at the end of our trip, so we had been there for 2 weeks. I think it was just the heat and humidity.
Yeah.
It was just, yeah, that was surprising.
Yeah, I think like climate definitely plays a big role into that.
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
you've been training up in Pine and then you came down to Phoenix and did Javelina, like you'd probably have a very similar reaction to the heat,
To the heat, yeah.
especially because you've been running in snow for the last month. Like,
Oh, it's terrible.
yeah. Every time I see pictures of Colorado, I'm like, oh, that looks cold.
Yeah. There's a lot of streets around here that don't see the sun, so every run since like November's definitely had patches of snow that you can't avoid.
That's crazy. Yeah. It's like that video of there's a girl I used to work with when I worked at Nike who slipped on ice in Portland and became a meme. And I refer to her a lot, but she is like one of the nicest humans I've ever met. She just didn't sound very nice when she talked to the reporter before she fell. But yeah, I guess like my next question, and like I'll let you guys go soon after I ask this, but when I sent out that survey and asked about like more in-person stuff, I would love to do more in-person stuff. I'm going to start putting together some options for like training weekends. I think it'd be a cool thing to do like like a full-on team camp where everyone like shows up, we just rent an Airbnb or like work with a hotel or like something local. But I think with this first year, like there's a lot of people doing the same races, like Chris, but like you're doing Desert Rats, right? Like getting something set up where like we do a race simulation weekend on the course as a group and everyone kind of like goes and does their same thing, but like we can come back and people who aren't racing Desert Rats can still show up and like hang out in Fruta, hang out in Grand Junction, wherever it ends up being. But I just want to like start doing more in-person things. A lot of people, like Caitlin's out at Western States. You live in a really cool part of the country. Like that could be a really fun thing too. And Keegan's running, one of our other teammates is running Western States. He got in through the lottery. So like something similar to that where we can like meet in person, hang out, share meals, like, you know, I think would be really great. So cool. I'll start trying to put that stuff together, but like the logistics overwhelm me a little bit, but it just like, I just got to do it. So
For what it's worth, Brett and I were talking about doing a Fruita weekend coming up in like a month.
ooh, that sounds fun. I could be
So I know
interested.
that's real quick, but like if people are interested, I mean, we both live in Denver, so can figure out the carpool situation.
Yeah, that would be really fun. I'm going to text you about that because
Okay.
that would be really fun. I
Yeah.
think that could be a cool option. Yeah. And I think too, yeah, obviously I like selfishly want to like show you guys around Tucson, especially in the winter, because the trails are immaculate right now. But I would never invite anyone here after May. So there's that. So yeah, but
Yeah, selfishly, I mean, I think that's such an awesome idea. If similar to what Chris just said, if there is anything that like you would need us to help out with to help plan
Yeah.
that, like I think everyone would be on board to like kind of start coordinate things. But I think that'd be so freaking cool.
yeah, okay, cool. Let's do it. Let's make it
Yeah, I
happen.
mean, I think I can probably speak for a lot of people that live in cold climates. If a visit to Tucson sounds really nice.
Yeah, part of me is like, oh my God, I should have planned this like in October, so it would have been like ready to go. But Tucson's really nice in the fall, winter, and like spring. The only time you don't want to be here is like May through November. So half the year. Whatever, you know. We could also go to Sedona. We'll figure it out. But yeah, cool. Well, that's exciting. I'm glad you guys are pumped. I think we should do this. I would love to check out the Western States course. I would love to go hang out in Fruta. I would like love to check out Ren's neck of the woods because that sounds awesome, minus the icy
Yeah.
hill. But wait till they melt.
For 4 weeks out of the year. But those 4 weeks are great.
Yeah, and all my family's on the East Coast, so it might give me an extra reason to go visit.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Okay. Well, there might be another survey for locations and times and places, or like a shared Google Doc or something where we can like drop in dates and places.
Yeah, I think some kind of like spreadsheet could be helpful too.
Cool. I think so too. Maybe even like a shared race document.
Yeah, I was about to say, I know that's one thing that well, it doesn't matter what we did. I think a shared race document would be, I love that idea.
Yeah. Okay. I'll put that together. The newsletter will probably come out a little later because I want to add that to it. So I'll get on it. Yay, you guys, this is so cool.
No pressure, Kristen.
I love being able to do whatever the heck we want. It's so fun. It's amazing.
It's fun to be a part of the evolution of integrated stride. Really
Doing
fun.
whatever the heck we want.
We get to see what happens. Why not?
Worst thing that could happen is like we pivot.
It doesn't work and we try something else.
Yeah. No bad option really. So cool. Okay. I'm gonna get to work on that, but thank you for the feedback and the ideas and the stoke. This is awesome. Let's do it.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, everyone.